Breaking right now, Trump panics, China refusing to help reopen Hormuz, oil crisis exploding, prices 106 plus. His big plan to fix global petrol chaos is crumbling. Welcome to Power Clash Report. We are interrupting our scheduled coverage because a development has just emerged that could fundamentally alter the trajectory of this crisis. Right now, in the corridors of power from Washington to Beijing, a silent but seismic shift is underway. The United States has reportedly requested China's assistance in de-escalating the Strait of Hormuz crisis, a request that has been met with a firm public refusal. Former President Trump, a central architect of the current pressure campaign against Iran, is reportedly in panic mode as the diplomatic foundation of his strategy shows signs of cracking. Oil prices have surged past $106 per barrel. Markets are volatile. And the question on everyone's mind is no longer just about oil, it is about power. Who holds it? Who is losing it? And what happens when the world's two largest economies find themselves on opposite sides of a flashpoint that could ignite a global economic crisis? Stay with me until the end. We are moving beyond the headlines to examine what China's refusal actually means, why Beijing has chosen this moment to draw a line, how this impacts the U.S. strategy for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and what oil crisis forever could mean for your wallet, your job, and the stability of the international order. This is not just about geopolitics. It is about the fragile systems that deliver energy, goods, and security to billions of people, and what happens when great power competition collides with global interdependence. Let us begin with the facts. The Strait of Hormuz is not just another waterway. It is the world's most critical oil chokepoint. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, approximately 21 million barrels of oil per day pass through this narrow strait, roughly 20% of global petroleum consumption. It is also the primary export route for liquefied natural gas from Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter. When the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted, the world feels it immediately. On March 17, 2026, multiple diplomatic and defense sources reported that the United States, through back-channel communications, formally requested China's assistance in facilitating a diplomatic solution to the Hormuz crisis. The request reportedly included proposals for China to use its influence with Iran to ease restrictions on navigation, to participate in a multinational naval de-escalation framework, or to support UN-mediated talks. China's response, delivered through its foreign ministry and state media, was unequivocal. Beijing would not intervene on Washington's terms. Chinese officials stated that the crisis was of the making of certain external powers and that any solution must respect Iran's sovereignty and address the root causes of regional tension, a clear reference to U.S. sanctions and military pressure. Now, let us examine why China's refusal matters. China is not just another global power. It is the world's largest importer of crude oil, purchasing approximately 1.2 million barrels per day from Iran alone under various trade arrangements. It is also Iran's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade exceeding $15 billion annually. Beijing has invested heavily in Iranian energy infrastructure, ports, and transportation networks as part of its Belt and Road initiative. This gives China significant leverage over Tehran, leverage that the United States had hoped to harness for de-escalation. By refusing to cooperate, China is not just saying no to a request. It is signaling a broader strategic posture, that it will not act as a subordinate partner in a U.S.-led crisis management framework, and that it will protect its economic and geopolitical interests in the Middle East on its own terms. This is where the claim that Trump is panicking enters the narrative. While panic is a strong word that may reflect political rhetoric more than operational reality, the underlying dynamic is real. The United States is facing a coalition-building challenge at a moment of acute crisis, and China's refusal removes a potentially critical diplomatic lever. Without Beijing's influence over Tehran, the U.S. strategy for reopening the strait relies more heavily on military deterrence and regional allies, both of which carry significant risks and limitations. This is a strategic vulnerability that any administration would take seriously. Let us talk about the economics, because this is where the impact becomes personal. Oil prices have already responded to the uncertainty. Brent crude has surged past $106 per barrel, a level not seen since the early stages of the Ukraine conflict. For consumers, this translates directly to higher prices at the pump. In the United States, the national average for regular gasoline could rise by 30 to 50 cents per gallon within weeks if the disruption persists. For businesses, higher fuel costs mean increased expenses for transportation, manufacturing, and logistics, costs that are often passed on to consumers. For developing nations that rely on affordable energy imports, the risk is not just inflation, but social unrest. This is how a crisis in a narrow strait can affect your household budget, your job security, and your community's stability. Now, let us address the oil crisis forever framing. This is a dramatic phrase that requires careful examination. From a strategic perspective, a prolonged disruption of the Strait of Hormuz would indeed have severe and lasting consequences. Analysts project that a sustained blockade could push oil prices above $150 per barrel, triggering inflationary spikes, market volatility, and potential recessionary pressures in energy-importing nations. Supply chains that depend on just-in-time delivery could seize up. Central banks might face difficult choices between fighting inflation and supporting growth. However, forever is a strong word. History shows that even severe energy crises eventually resolve through diplomacy, market adaptation, or technological substitution. The question is not whether the crisis will last forever, but how long it will last and how much pain it will cause in the meantime. Let us examine China's strategic calculus. Why has Beijing chosen to refuse U.S. requests at this moment? There are several factors at play. First principle, China has consistently advocated for a multipolar world order and opposed what it perceives as U.S. unilateralism. Intervening on Washington's terms could be seen as endorsing a framework that Beijing fundamentally rejects. Second, interest. China has significant economic ties with Iran that it is reluctant to jeopardize. Pressuring Tehran to concede to U.S. demands could undermine Beijing's influence and investment in the region. Third, opportunity. By positioning itself as an independent actor, China can enhance its diplomatic stature in the Middle East, potentially mediating future disputes on its own terms and expanding its strategic footprint. Fourth, domestic politics. Chinese leadership faces pressure to demonstrate strength and independence on the global stage. Refusing a U.S. request can be framed as a victory for national sovereignty and strategic autonomy. But let us also consider the risks for China. A prolonged Hormuz crisis could disrupt its own energy imports, raising costs for Chinese industries and consumers. It could also invite U.S. countermeasures such as secondary sanctions on Chinese entities trading with Iran or increased military presence in the region that complicates Beijing's naval operations. Moreover, if the crisis escalates into a wider conflict, China could find itself drawn in despite its best efforts to remain neutral. This is the delicate balance of great power competition. Every move has consequences, and every refusal carries costs. Now let us talk about the human dimension. Behind every strategic analysis are real people whose lives are shaped by conflict. In the Persian Gulf, sailors on commercial vessels face heightened risks. In Iran, workers at oil facilities worry about airstrikes. In China, consumers feel the pinch of rising energy costs. In the United States, families of deployed service members live with anxiety, and globally, households struggle to afford basics as inflation bites. The human cost of escalation is not abstract. It is measured in livelihoods, in mental health, in the daily struggle to afford fuel, food, and security. At Power Clash Report, we commit to covering the strategy without losing sight of the stakes. We will verify before we amplify, and we will humanize before we politicize. There is also the information warfare dimension. In the digital age, narratives are weapons. The claim that Trump is panicking may serve multiple purposes for different actors. For political opponents, it could undermine confidence in U.S. leadership. For adversaries, it could signal weakness and encourage further provocation. For media outlets, it could drive engagement through sensational framing. As consumers of information, our responsibility is to seek verification, consult credible sources, and resist the urge to share unconfirmed reports. This is not about censorship, it is about clarity. We will update this coverage as verified information emerges. Let us consider the regional implications. Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar are caught in a difficult position. They rely on U.S. security guarantees, but also maintain significant economic ties with China. A U.S.-China rift over Hormuz could force them to choose sides, a choice they are eager to avoid. Moreover, if China deepens its engagement with Iran as a counterbalance to U.S. pressure, It could reshape the regional balance of power in ways that Gulf states find unsettling. The region is a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and interdependent security concerns. A single diplomatic refusal in Beijing can ripple through this web in unpredictable ways. What about the global response? Major oil importing nations like India, Japan, and South Korea have significant stakes in the free flow of Hormuz. They have repeatedly called for restraint and diplomacy. A prolonged crisis that pits the U.S. against China could force them to navigate a difficult diplomatic tightrope, balancing economic interests with security partnerships. European nations already navigating energy transitions would face renewed inflationary pressure and potential social strain. The international community would likely urge de-escalation, but without leverage over either Washington or Beijing, diplomatic efforts may struggle to gain traction. So what happens next? There are several possible scenarios. In the most optimistic, back-channel diplomacy continues despite public posturing, leading to a negotiated de-escalation. Iran eases restrictions on the strait in exchange for concessions on sanctions or security guarantees, with China playing a quiet mediating role. In a more escalatory scenario, the blockade persists. The U.S. proceeds with unilateral or limited coalition military operations. China increases support for Iran, and the crisis expands into a broader great power confrontation. In a middle path, a face-saving compromise emerges. China facilitates limited humanitarian or energy shipments through the strait while talks continue, and the U.S. scales back its public rhetoric to create space for diplomacy. What can you do as an informed citizen? First, stay informed through credible sources. Follow official statements from governments, international organizations, and reputable news agencies. Be skeptical of viral claims that lack verification. Second, understand the broader context. This is not an isolated event. It is part of a long history of energy geopolitics, great power competition, and crisis diplomacy. Third, engage constructively. Share verified information. Support policies that prioritize diplomatic solutions and civilian protection. Advocate for clarity in crisis communication to reduce the risk of miscalculation. At Power Clash Report, we believe that knowledge is power. Understanding geopolitical events helps us make better decisions, protect our families, and contribute to a more stable world. Before we conclude, let us recap the key points. China has reportedly refused U.S. requests to assist in de-escalating the Strait of Hormuz crisis, citing principles of sovereignty and opposition to unilateralism. This refusal removes a critical diplomatic lever from the U.S. strategy for reopening the strait and signals Beijing's commitment to an independent Middle East policy. Oil prices have surged past $106 per barrel, with potential for further increases if the disruption persists. The claim that Trump is panicking reflects real strategic challenges, but may overstate operational realities. The phrase "oil crisis forever" is dramatic, but underscores the severe and lasting consequences of a prolonged Hormuz disruption. The human and economic stakes are substantial, affecting civilians, workers, consumers, and global stability. The path forward depends on verification, restraint, and responsible communication from all parties. The choice before the world's leaders is stark. They can allow fear and rhetoric to drive policy, risking a spiral of escalation. Or they can rely on intelligence, verification, and strategic patience to manage crises without surrendering to panic. History will judge this moment not by the threats issued, but by the wisdom with which they are answered. As citizens of an interconnected world, we have both the right and the responsibility to demand clarity over chaos, evidence over emotion, and truth over virality. If this analysis provided value, please like this video, subscribe to Power Clash Report, and share it with someone who needs to understand these developments. Turn on notifications so you do not miss our updates as this story evolves. In the description below, you will find links to official sources, energy market data, and further reading on this developing situation. We are committed to bringing you signal in a world of noise. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe. And remember, in a world of increasing uncertainty, clarity is the most valuable asset we have.